This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Bruchim Habayim, welcome everyone. Hope everyone is having a great day. We're continuing in the Sefer Orchos Chaim of the Rosh. We're up to Ois Lamed Beis, and this will be our last year until next Wednesday. Okay, we're up to Ois Lamed Beis. Zachar Yom Hamaves Tamid. Remember the day of death always. V'tzeda laderech hachein. And provisions for the road prepare. So one should always remember the day of death, and one should always prepare provisions for the road. In other words, Olam Haba is a very long journey. One spends a lot of time there. And the Gemara says about Reish Lakish, Zvida derech rachika, v'zvida kalila. It's a very long distance. It's a very long travel. A person spends a lot of time over there, and there's not a lot of provisions. So, as Reish Lakish said, a person has to prepare for themselves the provisions to be able to have enough supplies for this long travel, for this long journey. V'sim bein einecha, place between your eyes, shnei eila tamad, these two concepts always. V'yiyu mizumanim lecha liyoim hapirud, and they should be prepared for you on the day of separation. Now, what does that mean, that these two concepts should be prepared for you on the day of separation? It seems like what the Rosh is saying is that it's possible that you might forget the day of death. But the Rosh says that you need to remember it so that it's designated for you on the day that a person dies. Now, I can understand why during the course of a lifetime a person might forget about their demise, their end. But on the day of death itself, when they're facing it, when they're about to go to the next world, would anybody forget that there's a concept of death? Would anybody block it out of their mind? And apparently, if a person doesn't think about it during their lifetime, then a person could be facing death, a person could be about to go to the next world, and nevertheless, even so, a person could think to themselves, nah, it's not going to happen, it's not now, maybe it will happen a different time. Unless somebody is mentally prepared for that fateful moment, the moment could come and a person is not ready for it. And therefore, these two great concepts should always be before a person's eyes. Namely, the Yom HaMaves, the day of death. As the Gemara says in Brachas on Daf Hey, La'olam yargiz adam yetzer tov al yetzer hara. A person should always allow the yetzer tov to prevail over the yetzer hara. If you beat the yetzer hara, great. Otherwise, you should read the Torah. And if that doesn't work, you should say Shema. And if that doesn't work, you should remember the Yom HaMisa. So we see that Yom HaMisa saves the person from Chet. And furthermore, as the Gemara says in Ksubis Samach Zayin Amud Beis, that Reish Lakish said, Orcha Rachika Vizavdoi Kalila. It's a long road, a long voyage, and very few supplies. And the Rosh is saying, you better remember this for the day of separation, umitascha bedima timsa, and your bed you should soak in your tears. Simply, this means you should soak your bed in your tears of regret and yagoin for the averos that a person committed. This is how the Tosfos Yom Tov interprets these words. V'hamita asher ata shoyrev ba teherativa midma'oi sha'ata zoylek mipnei chato'echa. So one should constantly be doing tshuva. And then the Rosh ends with a very frightening message. He says, V'yav halucha rayonecha. Your thoughts should scare a person. Midei zichrecha, from merely remembering. Charadas Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai. The trembling of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai, Zichroino Levracha, of blessed memory. What is this referring to? The Gemara says in Brachas on Chav Chesam and Beis, the Gemara says that when Rabbi Yochanan Zakai was ill, his students came to visit him. When he saw them, he began to cry. So his Talmidim said, "Why are you crying?" So Rabbi Yochanan Zakai said, "If they would be taking me to in front of a Melech Basar V'Dam, that who gets angry at me, his anger is not forever, because one day he will die. If they were taking me to a king of flesh and blood, would I not cry? And now that they take me before the Melech Machi Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that if he is angry at me, he'd be angry at me forever." And furthermore, says Rabbi Yochanan Zakai, they could be taking me on two roads, one Gan Eden and one Gehenim, and I don't know which road they're taking me on. So Rabbi Yochanan Zakai was on his deathbed, and he was crying. Why was he crying? Because he didn't know what road he was going on. He didn't know if he was ending up in Gan Eden or Gehenim. And Rav Yitzchak Petterberg, in his very first Maimar, in the Koich Vayar, he asks, what exactly was Rabbi Yochanan Zakai afraid of? Even if he did an Avera, certainly Rabbi Yochanan Zakai was constantly doing tshuva. I mean, we learned yesterday, one should constantly be doing tshuva. Every day you need to connect to the midah of tshuva by every meal, before you learn, before shkia, before you go to sleep. So certainly Rabbi Yochanan Zakai was constantly doing tshuva. So what was he worried about? Did he really think he wasn't going to go to Gan Eden? Did he really think he was going to go Chas v'Sham to Gehenna? Certainly he never did any Averos intentionally, and if he did tshuva immediately. What was Rabbi Yochanan Zakai worried about? And Rav Yitzchak Petterberg explains that Rabbi Yochanan Zakai was not worried about the Averos that he may have done, and because those Averos, he certainly did tshuva for. What he was worried about is that which the Gemara says in Psachim and Daf Nun Daled, that one of the things that is hidden from the eye and the understanding of man is oimek hadin. One of the things that we don't appreciate and we don't recognize and we don't understand, and it's hidden from us, is the profundity of judgment, the strictness of judgment. And Rabbi Yochanan Zakai was afraid that there might have been things that he did that he thought maybe were not wrong, or maybe he even thought they were a mitzvah, but in the eyes of Shamayim, he was being held accountable for it. And therefore, says the Rosh, one needs to constantly think about the Yom HaMaves, and to prepare provisions as much as he can, and to think about this thought of Rabbi Yochanan Zakai, that the great leader of the Jewish people, he did not know where he was going to end up. And if Rabbi Yochanan Zakai was afraid of what is known as Oimek Hadin, then for us, Alachas Kama V'Kama. We're going to, on this coming Sunday, to the grave of the great officer and prince in Israel, Moses Montefiore, who's buried in Ramsgate. And legend has it that in his final moments on this world, he called out to those by his bedside, is there a charity that I haven't given to? Is there a poor man that I could still help? Is there something else I could do for the Jewish people? Here, he was a man who, legend has it, he would go down and sleep every night in a coffin and put on burial shrouds so that he would always remember the Yom HaMisa. But he's someone who valued every moment of life. And if somebody thinks about their end, so then they take advantage of the time that God has allotted them. Okay, Rabbi say, we'll see everybody, Be'ezus Hashem, next Wednesday. Until then, I wish everyone bracha v'hatzlacha.
What time? Could we make this year 5:30?
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.